And now I would like to introduce you to your host, Albertina Vaughn.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for taking the time to be here. We recognize what a difficult time it is. This is the 7th webinar in our series, Leading Through and Beyond COVID-19. And our purpose here is to really share ideas, what might help you to keep your business moving forward. The series has spanned various topics from the perspective of your own personal leadership, keeping your people energized, and caring for the health of your organization. This webinar is titled Creating Effective Learning Experiences in a Virtual Environment. And today, so we're going to share this experience, and I think it's something that's challenging to most of us right now in organizational life. All around the world, we are working remotely. We can't be together in the same room, yet business is not stopping. And I venture to say that we need leadership development and learning now more than ever. And most of our learning programs in organizations rely on some element of face-to-face interaction. So the question that we have today is, how do we keep up the momentum of our learning program that we're planning to bring people together that we now need to do virtually? So let me start by introducing my esteemed colleagues from Korn, Ferry, and then we'll delve deeper into this topic. Trian Mueller is our Chief Product Officer for our Learning and Content Strategy at KF Digital. He brings 15 years of experience in the L&D industry, and he's the author of several publications, including The Learning Explosion, 9 Rules to Ignite Your Virtual Classrooms, which will really come in handy now, especially for this webinar, but in our work in general in learning. I'm also pleased to introduce my colleague, Maria Crockett. She is an executive coach in our Korn Ferry Advanced practice. She also has about a decade of experience in the L&D world and has written several publications. The most recent includes The Secrets of a Career Consultant: Reduce Your Frustration on Finding a New Job. So welcome, Maria and Trian. Really pleased that you could join us today, and looking forward to hearing from you. So how we've structured our time together is to really address the responses that have come in our pre-webinar survey question that we sent out yesterday. So thank you to all of those who answered the question and contributed. The question we asked is if you could identify kind of the biggest pain points that your organization is facing as it relates to going virtual with your learning programs. And so we're going to set this up as a conversation. A couple questions that will drive our agenda today is really, as I started with, how do you take that in-person workshop and convert it to be just as effective in a virtual environment? Next, how do we really drive engagement and accountability in our virtual learning? That's sort of the logical next question. And then we're going to take a look specifically at coaching conversations, a very intimate, typically face-to-face conversation, or preferably, and how do you really maximize that in a virtual world? And let me start by saying that I think it's important to state that, virtual learning, it's not new. It has been around for a while, and we are really drawn to it. It's scalable. You can save a lot of money. You don't have to pay for travel. You can condense it into shorter formats, so it's shorter in duration. But many organizations have really only experimented with webinars and e-learning, which alone is really not enough to get learning. It's a great way to disseminate content, and you can have a very obvious test for understanding. But there were a lot of comments in your survey feedback about, how do you really engage learners? And that feels to me like the #1 question that we're hearing is, we want to go virtual, but how do you get individuals to participate, engage, and actually apply what they learn? So, Trian, let's start with you. You've written a book on this topic. You want to tackle this question for us?
Sure. I think the greatest challenge we have is coming from a place of comfort. As humans, we like homeostasis, we like comfort. And we come from a place where we've been teaching in the classroom in front of people for decades and centuries, actually. So we've been conditioned to expect certain things. So the biggest mistake we can make is assume that we just have to throw our instructor-led or in-person materials into a digital or online environment and then do the same thing, because it's actually a very different experience. And the first thing I talk about when it comes to engagement is to remember that important fact. You have a different environment. You have a screen that you need to humanize. And what people typically do is that they default to what they know. They go into the things that you see on the screen right now on the left-hand side, which is a virtual instructor-led. And many experiences that I'm sure you have gone through, you've seen something similar, where you have information sharing, but no real application, no behavior change, no practice opportunities, or very low practice opportunities. The sage on the stage, the talking head, the sit-back passive learner experience, again, low to no engagement, death by PowerPoint, time to catch up on emails. That's what people think. I'm going to catch up on emails on the news and on my social media, because that's what we've been conditioned to do, because people haven't taken the time to really prepare that experience for a different, completely different purpose. So you can't just do what you usually do, is what I'm saying, in instructor-led in a virtual classroom.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Trion, and I was thinking about this quite a bit, that, you know, there is a time and a place for a webinar or an e-learning as part of a journey. And we're on a webinar right now where, you know, we're not intending for this to be an intimate learning experience. We've got thousands of people joining us around the world, and it's meant to disseminate information and start a conversation. Our purpose is not to start to drive accountability and test for behavior change and all of those objectives that we put in our learning programs, right?
True. It's very different. What we're doing here is information sharing. When we want learning and development, we want that same kind of experience where we have in person. That's where we turn to the virtual accountability model. This is actually a model that a colleague and I came up with during the time of the swine flu. That was the last pandemic, and actually the first pandemic of the 21st century. We realized, wow, if this is going to affect the world like it did back in 2009 with the swine flu, we thought, oh dear, what can we do to make learning and development recession-proof or pandemic-proof? And we realized then, and we created this model, and we tested and failed and tested and failed, and have proven over 500,000 people have benefited from this model and gone through this. When we build a virtual experience around virtual accountability. So not only are your learners you're trying to engage them, but you're holding them accountable to you as the facilitator and to the rest of the group. And you do that through verbal accountability, visual accountability, and kinesthetic or movement and accountability there. And you have to instructionally design the experience to include these accountabilities and then facilitate towards it. You have interaction when you do this, by the way, at least every minute, if not more, in one of these accountabilities or more. That's how you not only get engagement, but you actually get behavior change because you're holding people accountable. So this is a model that we are rolling out here at Korn Ferry as well, and sharing with people, especially through virtual accountability in the virtual classroom experiences, but also in other things like coaching that Mario will talk about. But you can hold people accountable in many instances so that it can be effective.
Yeah, absolutely. And why don't we just share, I'm going to share this, talk a little bit more about what this looks and feels like in terms of, I'm very interested in how the classroom has changed. Some of us who are joining today might have not experimented as much with some of the newer ways to create accountability in the virtual classroom.
Sure. So what you're seeing now is a screenshot of Adobe Connect. And by no means do you have to use Adobe Connect for virtual accountability, but here's an example of what the default setting in Adobe Connect is. You get 3 layouts. You look on the right-hand side, you see a red box around 3 layouts. And this is the first layout. It's a very traditional mindset, and people talk to this for an hour or even a day. I've seen it being done where you use these 3 layouts. It's a default setting. So in one of my books, one of the rules is don't default. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see an example. And some of you are asking in the Q&A, what are examples of this virtual accountability? So in the next slide, you'll see, here's an example of how to use Adobe Connect differently so that you create virtual accountability opportunities. So here's an example of a breakout room. So yes, instead of just talking, you're having people in groups speaking around a topic. In this case, it's the ADAPT model. And and here we're saying for A, one group's going to deal with A, next group D, A, P, and T. And you answer these questions. But look on the right-hand side, you'll see something that only the facilitators and the producers see. That is the facilitator notes that actually walks a facilitator or producer through what they should do and when they should do it, so that it reduces stress for the facilitator and the producer. Without guessing, they don't have to float pods in, polls or chats. It's built for them. And you look on the further right, to the right of that box, you'll see there's a bunch of layouts. There's 12 that you can see. So we build the virtual classroom experience around a very engaging experience. So we would have, for example, the opportunity for people to speak out verbally. So there's verbal accountability in their groups. They would be visually looking at the model and applying what they learned there. And then kinesthetic is to typing into the chat pod, in the poll pods. So they are engaged. Their whole body and mind is engaged in that experience instead of just sitting back and waiting for the facilitator to do all the talking.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just one small example of how you apply that model.
Thank you for sharing that. I think what I'm hearing is, every few minutes you need to do some activity, some type of interaction. And I love I saw on there the breakout rooms as well. I think that's another best practice, right?
Yes.
Like how using breakout rooms to create that small group dialogue. What other best practices do you have for the professionals who are migrating their face-to-face into the virtual classroom?
Well, keep your classroom sizes or the group of people that are attending around the same than you would in a live experience. And what I tell people, if you can, unless they're in a noisy area, tell them, this is the verbal accountability principle, tell them not to put their phones on mute, and tell them often, because people need to be reminded, and have them speak up at any moment and say, oh, wait, could you explain that again? Like you would in a live setting. Now, it takes a little bit of conditioning and expectations, but it's a great principle. It creates this lively, energetic experience that you can have that actually makes participation, a higher participation rate in this experience than you would in a live experience, because people aren't afraid, especially if you're not using video, people aren't afraid to speak up because they're not afraid of public speaking if it's just their screen and they're typing in a chat.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, and it makes me think about communication in general and how it's different virtually versus face-to-face, and maybe Maria, we can shift into the coaching environment, because I'm thinking about coaching, and most of the time our experience is that let's plan for face-to-face. Face-to-face is ideal. It's more effective. These are general assumptions that we have, that people have. And as a plan B, we can do a phone. As a plan B, we'll get online and do it that way. But we prefer face-to-face. And I know that you've been doing virtual coaching or phone coaching in our Korn Ferry Advanced practice for quite some time. So I'm curious to hear about your experience having done a lot of face-to-face as well as virtual. How do they compare, and what do you really need to be mindful of when you're working in the virtual environment?
That's such a great question, Albertina. Thank you for asking. A lot of times people, they don't really know the difference or really know why there would be a difference between face-to-face or even virtual. The virtual could be on the phone, or it could be utilizing a tool like Zoom. But there really there's not that many differences. The one major thing is the actual person that's doing the coaching, because you can create a safe space on the phone just like you can in person. You can also go about asking questions and having those cues. The one thing that's the difference that actually makes you an even better coach, at least in my opinion, is the fact that you miss visual cues. So you can't see me smile. You can't see my hands moving if I'm on the phone. But with the losing of those visual cues, it makes it so I really have to listen. I really have to be very mindful of what the other person is saying. And it even makes it more intimate for the coaching people that are maybe coaches. Intimacy for ICF, or the International Coaching Federation, is so important. So you want to be able to create that dialogue that's not noticeable if I'm on the phone. And if I am able to have that amazing presence with the person on the phone, then I can ask powerful questions, like not worrying about the pandemic, but asking what great happened with your week, or what did you learn in the process, or what have you been learning in the current process that you've been dealing with these changes. We also are able to, on the phone as well as if we're on Zoom, is to be able to create some motivation. How can we continue with the conversation? Create goals, recreate goals, and also make it so that it's interactive. Shreyan made some wonderful suggestions on what can be done in a virtual world, but those are the same exact principles that we would utilize online or on the phone when we're coaching. One of my favorite parts about coaching on the phone or even online is that we get to share resources. So we can use emerging technologies to be able to talk to individuals and continue the conversation. We can send tip sheets. We can create a list of books that people can read. So as they continue to learn, we can create videos for them, or even share videos, and even create online materials specifically for the topic at hand. So it's not just there, differences between the face-to-face and online. We really have to do more on, as we can see now, with online and utilizing the phone for the different types of things that we're going to be doing, especially moving forward in coaching.
Yeah, I like that idea, and I hadn't thought about that, how it really opens up more avenues and more types of communication. If you think about a face-to-face meeting, it's highly scheduled, might involve travel, whether that's a flight or going to another building on your campus, another office for a meeting. There's travel time, and there's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it feels more like an event. Whereas if you're working virtually and coaching virtually, it just opens up a lot more communication options that feel more natural.
I agree. And then we can be more human. I can be sitting in my PJs talking to you in my most comfortable environment. And it is a place that's safe. It's safe for me as the coach. It's safe for you as the coachee. And it really just makes it so that it's kind of all of our biases are now removed. And now you're just listening to my voice. So if I'm really speaking low, or if I'm speaking high, if I am my rate of speech, you're really paying attention to who I am and what I'm saying. And that is what is so important when it comes to coaching and the experience. Even when it comes to e-learning, you want to make sure that you are in tune and attentive to the experience. And that is really important when it comes to the virtual way of doing coaching.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you then the controversial question. This all sounds great. Do you use your video for coaching, and how does that enhance or detract from the experience?
Well, I'll tell you, I don't like to use my video unless I really have to, because then I have to comb my hair and put on makeup. So I do sometimes. We have coaches that do videos online, but actually our clients prefer to be on the phone because it is good. They are able to be in the most comfortable place. If they want to sit back and relax, they can be at their most comfortable themselves. They can be authentic during the conversations, and they don't have to put on a face or put on a front that sometimes happens when you are online or on a visual or on a camera.
Yeah, I like that. And I think for coaching, you're one-on-one, and you're doing so much listening that you don't have the same dynamic of checking out like you would in a larger group experience. So now I'm what's your recommendation when we think about the virtual classroom and we've got, maybe 20, 30 or more? Do you use the video, and do you have the participants use video?
Remember, the purpose for a virtual classroom is different than this kind of a meeting, this is information sharing, it's best ideas, it's that kind of a thing. When you actually have a learning and development experience, I wouldn't use the video unless it's specifically for a purpose, like you're doing sales training and you want to see someone give a pitch to the group using video. That's fine. There's also some cultural reasons you may want to use video to show up front, to add credibility to the individual, and then at the end to close it up to show there's a human behind the voice. But for the most part, like you guys have been talking about, it doesn't add a lot of value. It also causes more stress to the facilitator, as we've discussed. But if you're going to use it, then there's some fun things you can do. For example, I could share with you that this is where I am right now, waiting for the stock to come in so that I can be this guy and prepared for the zombie apocalypse. So just there's some fun things that we can do with video, but for the most part, I wouldn't use it.
I love it. I absolutely love it. And I know where to go if I need my supplies now. This is great. I am loving all of these tips, how to effectively use a virtual classroom, tips for coaching. I think now let's shift into design examples. So to see how this comes together, we thought it would be helpful to share a real live design, a real situation that we're dealing with. We have the opportunity to deal with because it's an interesting challenge. So let me go ahead and show you quite busy slide here, but I'm going to walk you through it. What's on your screen is a typical leadership development program architecture. So a learning journey, if you will. Across the top, you'll see there are 3 phases. And the 3 phases in the original design are largely defined by 3 face-to-face sessions. And that's what you see running across that top row of the cohort experience. This is where we're bringing the whole group of 30 together in a conference center, in the classroom, and having very long days with lots of content, lots of interaction, lots of activity, a lot of learning going on in the face-to-face. We delivered the first session in December to kick it off. We had planned on the second face-to-face being in March, which you know where I'm going. We have now delivered that virtually, and I'll tell you more about that. And then we're also planning the final capstone session, which we're hoping will happen in February. We still have that on the calendar. We're not prepared to shift it to virtual yet. We would like to bring the group back together, but our learning from the session 2 is that if we need to do it virtually, we're confident, and we'd be fine doing that with this group and how we structured things. What you see in the middle here are individual activities. These activities were always planned to happen in virtual space. So we had always planned on doing some assessment to kick it off, development planning. We've got some self-directed learning in here, some webinars and e-learning folks can access, and also coaching that runs across the whole experience. So typical blended format. We had also planned, and now you can see also the shading here on the bottom row, we had planned for some more face-to-face in addition to the 3 residentials. We had planned some peer consulting as well as some learning groups to tackle their individual challenges and some business challenges that we had baked into the design. So your typical high impact, this is for a high potential audience. Hence the investment in a lot of time and in this robust learning journey. I'm sharing it because it's also kind of a best practice of design. All right, so what did we do with that March program? It was scheduled to be 3 days. What we've done is we've shifted that. We kept the dates because it was such short notice. We couldn't shift calendars, and we decided to keep the dates. But what we didn't do is just have everybody online for 10-hour days in front of their laptops and doing the same design. That would not work. That would not be a conducive environment for learning. So what we did is we condensed it to half days. And we also had a mix within those half days. So we had a mix of bringing the whole cohort together in a virtual classroom, having interaction, participation every few minutes to keep them engaged, giving them assignments, giving the groups assignments, both as a group, small groups, and we use breakout rooms, as well as assignments where we had them actually log off, do some reflection, work on a bit, and come back online and share the results of that. So we really tried to bake in the learning cycle into the design. And then I'll just shift to the next slide here, which is a summary of our big picture kind of from to. Moving from, originally, we had long days, very packed agenda. For those of you that are designers on the phone know that we want to fit in as much as we can, but you know, we're not going to do that in a virtual classroom. You got to have shorter, you got to have more targeted modules, like we say, chunk it out. to create that learning journey. For table groups, in a face-to-face room, you'd have people set up in round tables in this design format. We use the virtual breakouts. It's technically easier than you think to run a breakout using some of the new platforms. First time, people are a bit nervous, but just give it a try. It's easier than you think. Instead of having the physical flip charts, which we love using when we're live, you can do virtual whiteboards and really achieve the same result, really the same result. You've got to get used to using them. You got to try. I know that we miss in the face-to-face when we move to virtual, that networking time and building those relationships on the edges of, the dinners, the evening events. But, put some more structure to some of those peer sessions, add in trio group coaching, peer coaching groups, and have the groups come together in the virtual space. You can achieve building relationships virtually. And I think we're all starting to experience that now in our new remote workplace. And then a big one, this is a bonus, travel time. We have people flying around the world. There's jet lag. There's a carbon footprint. There's work that you need to do, catch up on in the evenings when you do these residential offsites. And that's always been a challenge when we're designing to factor those in. And now, if you go virtual, you can really integrate it seamlessly into the workday, just like how you're listening in on this webinar now to get a little burst of insight, which I hope is what we've provided for you all. And I know we are coming to the end of our 30 minutes. I want to, first of all, acknowledge that we've got a lot of questions coming in to the Q&A, which is fantastic. We will try to answer them all. And I also want to thank my colleagues, Maria and Trion. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and your expertise with everyone today. And I want to leave you guys with some links to check out on our website. These QR codes will take you through some virtual meeting tips that we've got posted, as well as visit our COVID-19 leading through and beyond COVID-19 website. We've got lots of great information on there that we're providing. And here you can see the full list of the webinars in the series. We're making them all available on demand. And want to remind you that we have a new one that we added for tomorrow. And I love this topic on cultivating personal resilience amidst volatility. So on that note, Donna, I'll turn it over to you for any closing comments to close us out. And I just want to thank everyone for joining. Maria, Trion, thank you, and have a great day. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. That was fantastic. Thanks, speakers and everyone who attended today's webinar. I'll just reiterate what we said, that it has been recorded. You will receive an email with the links to the recording and the slides, and you can access them, as Albertina said, via the Korn Ferry website that we have in all of our communications to you. We will be closing the meeting in just one moment, so I wanted to say stay safe and be well.